Hello dears, today's class is about how to approach a patient with neurogenic bladder dysfunction in spinal cord injury. We all know that causes of spinal cord injuries are trauma, vascular causes like AV malformation, disc disease, mainly lumbar disc disease, surgery, or congenital causes like myelomeningocele. The normal functions of urinary bladder are to store and void urine under normal pressure. The bladder dysfunction may occur at the bladder level or at the outlet level, sometimes at both levels. In suprasacral lesions, there may be detrusor overactivity, detrusor sphincter dyssynergia, vesicoureteric reflux, and there may be long-term complications like hydroureter, hydronephrosis, pyelonephritis, and renal failure. In sacral and below level lesion, there will be hypertonia of the bladder and overflow dribbling. In the past, the leading cause of death was renal failure in spinal cord injuries patients. Now, the respiratory disease is the most common cause of death in spinal cord injuries. This is because of improvement in the management of neurogenic bladder in spinal cord injury patients. So, in the rehabilitation of neurogenic bladder, early characterization and typing of the lesion is very important. This will help us to prevent the development of complications and it will enhance the recovery also. And regular follow-up will also help to improve the quality of life of the spinal cord injury patients. Now, patient history. Taking a thorough history is the cornerstone of evaluation. Along with the neurological history, we have to take history regarding urology, bowel, sexual history, etc. should also be taken. There may be features of recurrent urinary tract infection in patients in the history. Now moving to neurological history. In the neurological history, we have to take a detailed history regarding the motor and sensory symptoms. That is, onset of symptoms, character, duration, progression, and the present status. Patient may be having increased or decreased tone as manifested as tightness in the movement of a joint or flaccidity. Sometimes may be having flaccidity. In lesions above T6 or sometimes above T10, the patient may be having features of autonomic dysreflexia. We should also inquire about the mobility level of the patient and the level of dependence on others for performing activities of daily living. In patients with a tetraplegia, where there is poor hand dexterity, we should inquire about the hand functions level. This is very important to assess whether the patient can do intermittent catheterization or not. Now moving to urology history, we should inquire about the type of wording, whether it is a indwelling catheter or intermittent clean catheterization, etc. We should inquire about the history, whether the patient is having any urinary incontinence or whether increased or decreased frequency, presence of bladder sensation, hematuria, dysuria, post-void dribbling, straining, nocturia, lower abdominal pain, urethral discharge, fever and chills, etc. We can also take a rough bladder diary from the history itself. Now moving to bowel. Taking bowel history is also important because it reflects the neurological status of the urinary bladder also. We have to ask about whether there is any history of fecal incontinence, increased frequency, defecation pattern, whether the patient is having rectal sensation or not, initiation of defecation, which may be by digital stimulation or digital evacuation. This will help us to differentiate between a UMN or a LMN bowel, which will give clues to the bladder characterization. Now, regarding sexual history, we should ask whether there is any presence of genital or sexual dysfunction symptoms, any sensory impairment in the genital area, whether the patient is having psychogenic or refluxogenic erections in males, etc. Now, moving to past medical and surgical histories. First, we should ask whether the patient is having any history of diabetes mellitus, because this will produce autonomic dysfunction. And tuberculosis, there may be impaired RFT following medicine usage. Urethral obstruction, recurrent urinary tract infections, previous history of urinary retention, impaired gastric emptying. Mainly, we have to take a special care while prescribing antimuscarinic drugs, which produces constipation. Then hypertension, heart disease, previous genitourinary surgeries, radiation to pelvis, etc. Now, moving to personal history. In patients with habit of cigarette smoking, there will be increased in chance of erectile dysfunction. Similarly, chronic alcoholism or drug abuse may cause autonomic or peripheral neuropathy, decreases serum testosterone in alcoholism, and may cause testicular atrophy and decreased libido. Then, regarding family history, we have to ask whether there is any history of tuberculosis, diabetes mellitus, and hypertension in the family, and also whether the patient will get any support from close relatives and friends, like from brothers and sisters or close friends. Now, moving to socio-economic status, we should assess the level of education, the occupation the patient previously had, the financial status of the patient and the family, whether the patient needs any help from the family members, etc. The type of house, the type of bathroom, toilet, vehicle accessibility, etc. should also be noted to assess the living condition. Actually, the socio-economic history will help us to predict the level of the quality of life of the patient. Now, moving to functional level. Functional level of the patient can be assessed using functional independence measure or the FIM scale. Here, the toilet activities, bowel and bladder functions should be assessed in detail. The self-care activities like eating, feeding, grooming, assessment are also important because it gives information about the hand dexterity in these patients. Similarly, transfer and mobility should also be assessed. Now, in the physical examination, moving to physical examination, we have to first assess the general condition of the patient, the attitude, skin, eyes, nails, etc. We should also record vitals like pulse, blood pressure, respiratory rate. Then, moving to musculoskeletal examination, in the inspection, we should look for any deformities like scoliosis, kyphosis, lordosis, joint deformities, swelling, scar, wasting of muscles, etc. In palpation, first we have to look for any local rise of temperature, tenderness, deformity, and wasting of muscles, etc. We should also assess the tone whether it is spastic or whether it is hypotonic or whether it is normal. Using goniometer, we can measure passive and active range of motion. Now, moving to neurological examination, we have to first assess the higher functions and cranial nerves also. Motor assessment helps us to determine the muscle strength, especially of the upper limbs, and hand dexterity also. Voluntary anal contraction should also be assessed while doing BCR or bulbocavernous reflex. Sensory examination should include the assessment of perianal and deep anal sensations. Both are S4 and S5 supply. From now we are having the motor and sensory level. From this we can get the neurological level as per American Spinal Injury Association scale or the ASIA scale. We should also examine the superficial and deep tendon reflexes, including bulbocavernous reflex and anal reflex. S234, both are supplied by S234. We can also assess the condition of the prostate during the BCR assessment. Now moving to management. From the history and physical examination, we can have a anatomical diagnosis and a pathological diagnosis of the spinal cord injury. From this, we can identify the impairments. We can determine the impairments and disabilities the patient is having. So we can plan rehabilitation goals as immediate goals, intermediate goals, and long-term goals. From here onwards, we will be focusing on urological rehabilitation. Now, moving to, so what are the goals of bladder management? The first goal is to prevent the development of upper tract complications like hydroureter, hydronephrosis, pyelonephritis, renal failure, etc. Next is to prevent the development of lower urinary tract complications like increased bladder wall thickness, recurrent UTI, saculations, trabeculations, vesicoureteric reflux, etc. The ultimate goal of bladder management is to achieve a socially acceptable bladder in spinal cord injury patients. Now we can look back into a slide we have discussed on the pathophysiology section. After the neurological diagnosis, we can classify the bladder dysfunctions into an UMN type bladder or a LMN type bladder, that is suprasacral bladder or a sacral or below level lesion bladder. In the suprasacral level lesion of the spinal cord injury, the lesion will be seen between pons and the sacral cord above S234. Whereas in sacral and below level lesions, the lesion lies at the S23 level or coda equina. In suprasacral level, there will be failure to store urine, whereas in sacral and infrasacral, there will be failure to empty the urine. Empty the bladder. In suprasacral lesions, there will be detrusor overactivity and there will be no voluntary relaxation of the external sphincter. Whereas in sacral and below level lesions, the detrusor is hypotonic and sphincter will be relaxed. But the internal sphincter, which is supplied by the sympathetic nerves, will function normally, and this causes urine retention to some extent. And the fourth difference is in suprasacral level or UMN bladder, there will be reflex voiding or simultaneous contraction of the detrusor and sphincter, which causes detrusor sphincter dysynergia, and this causes increase in bladder pressure and upper tract changes. Whereas in sacral and below level lesions, the internal sphincter, which which is not an true anatomic sphincter, will not contribute to incontinence, will not contribute to continence. When the bladder is filled to a certain level and in conditions of stress like coughing, urine leakage will occur. Now we can go to bladder workup. From the history, we got information regarding the bladder sensation, incontinence, frequency, increased or decreased frequency, whether the patient needs straining or not, nocturia, post-void dribbling, etc. From the physical examination, we will get information regarding tone, motor level, sensory level, and reflexes. This includes perianal sensation, deep anal sensations, voluntary anal contractions, bulbocavernous reflex, BCR, etc. So now we can characterize the bladder dysfunction into a suprasacral or UMN type or sacral and below level lesion or a LMN bladder. So before going to the management, we have to assess the general condition of the patient and urinary tract in particular. For this, we have to do blood tests like CBC, ESR, fasting blood sugar, postprandial blood sugar, and sometimes HbA1c to assess the glycemic status. Blood urea and serum creatinine to assess the renal status. And liver function test to assess the protein level. Fasting lipid profile, serum electrolytes also should be examined. And to rule out infections, we have to do a urine analysis and culture of the midstream sample of urine. We can assess the post-void residual urine volume, that is the volume of urine left behind after normal voiding. If it is more than 100 ml on repeated assessment, it is significant. The bladder diary gives information about the total fluid intake, urine output, time of leakage, etc. Routine ultrasound KUB examination is also to be done for assessing the upper tract as well as lower tract. And sometimes we may need to do a urodynamic study if we have got any difficulty in diagnosis or when there is not much progress in treatment also. Now moving to rehabilitation of spinal cord injury. Most probably the patient will be having an indwelling catheter when the patient comes first at 3 months after injury. Our aim of rehabilitation is to get a balanced bladder, that is a bladder with low pressure and normal continence with only minimal infections and no upper tract complications. If the urinary tract is free from significant bacteriuria, pus cells, and there are no fresh onset signs and symptoms suggestive of infections, but the residual urine or the RU volume is more than 100 ml on repeated estimations, we have to start clean intermittent catheterization. If the patient is having hand dexterity, the patient can do self-intermittent catheterization. Otherwise, the caregiver has to be taught of doing intermittent catheterization. If the patient has started intermittent clean catheterization, drinking voiding catheterization schedule has to be implemented with an intake of 2 to 2.5 liter of fluid daily. If after certain weeks or months, if residual urine volume or RU becomes less than persisting below 100 ml, on repeated examinations, we can withhold ICC. In suprasacral or human blood, light suprapubic tapping can be given to facilitate voiding, whereas in sacral and below level bladder, Credes and Valsalva menus can be advised. So in certain cases, the patient may need long-term bladder drainage. Which are these conditions? If the patient is not willing to do ICC, intermittent clean catheterization. The tetraplegics who cannot perform intermittent catheterization due to loss of hand dexterity is the second one. Then men who are not able to maintain the condom catheter on penis with a element type bladder will also needs long-term bladder drainage. However, long-term indwelling catheter has got complications also. Which are they? They are recurrent urinary tract infections, stone formation, epididymitis, prostatitis, bladder cancer, and hypospadiasis. In this condition, suprapubic cystostomy is an alternate option. It has got less incidence of epididymitis and prostatitis. Now we are going for the specific management. Here there are two different clinical situations. One is there will be failure to store urine. So our management should be to facilitate urine storage or bladder filling. And the second condition will be there will be failure to pass urine. So our management should be to facilitate the bladder emptying or voiding. Now we can look into the management to facilitate urine storage. Failure to store urine may be due to problems at the bladder level or at the outlet level. First, we can look into the bladder related dysfunction management. One is behavioral therapy. This is by giving education regarding the importance of drinking and voiding. Then timed voiding, drinking voiding, catheterization schedule, etc. In the pharmacological management, the first line of management is with antimuscarinics like oxybutynin, tolterodine, darifenazine, etc. These drugs have main side effects as dryness of mouth and constipation. Second drug which now commonly used is beta-3 receptor agonist, mirabegron, which is given in a dose of 50 to 100 mg once daily. Intravesical therapy can be also given with botulinum toxin type A. This reduces the detrusor overactivity for 6 to 9 months. It can be given in the dose of 200 units via cystoscopic injection. Next option is bladder augmentation with ileum. Patient will have to depend on intermittent catheterization after surgery. This is to prevent the development of mucus formation. And last, in the bladder related management, denervation procedures. Theoretically, it appears very attractive, but the procedure is not widely used. Selective rhizotomy at S3 root on one side can be done. Other method is to interrupt the peripheral nerve supply to bladder. Now moving to the management of outlet related problems. First is here we are trying to increase the resistance of the sphincter to facilitate urine storage. First is behavioral therapy. This is by the voiding and pelvic floor exercises. Second is pharmacological agents can be used. Here, alpha agonist, which increases the tone of the urethra, can be used. Examples are ephedrine, phenylpropanol, etc. And surgeries with facial sling surgery can be used with rectus shield or tensor fasciolata Here bladder neck will be elevated, and urethral bulking agents can also be used like Teflon, bovine collagen, hydroxyapatite, autologous stem cells, etc. And artificial sphincter with inflatable cuff around the urethra is another option. This we have already discussed in the last class. Now moving to the management to facilitate emptying of bladder. Here the failure to void urine completely, there will be failure to void urine completely. This can be due to dysfunction at the bladder level or outlet level. At the outlet level, it can be at the level of smooth sphincter or internal sphincter, or it could be at the level of striated sphincter or the external sphincter. So the management of these dysfunctions can be dealt separately. First, we can look into the management at the bladder level. First is behavioral therapy. Here, external compressions like Valsalva can be done in element type, whereas light suprapubic tapping can be done in UMN type bladder. Then, in pharmacological agents, we can use parasympathomimetic drugs like bethanicol. Cisapride can also be given. Then another option is electrical stimulation. Here, detrusor contractions can be achieved by stimulating the electrode implanted on the bladder wall, pelvic nerves, sacral roots, conus, etc. Then we can try reduction cystoplasty in very high capacity bladder. Then moving to the second one, the management at the level of smooth sphincter. Here, pharmacological agents like alpha adrenergic antagonists like tamsulosin, sildosin can be given. Beta 3 adrenergic agonists like mirabegron can also be given. Then botulinum toxin injection can be given. And if there is associated BPH, we can do transurethral resection of prostate. And the third one is management at the striated sphincter level or external sphincter. Here we can advise behavioral therapy, that is pelvic floor exercises, biofeedback, etc. And in the pharmacological therapy, we can advise benzodiazepines, baclofen, dandrolene, botulinum toxin injection, etc. And in surgery, we can advise surgical sphincterotomy, urethral stent, pudendal nerve interruption can also be tried. Now, we should have a meticulous follow-up. This is essential to assess this unstable condition in neurogenic bladder, because in view of recurrent UTI and other things. Detailed investigations should be repeated once in every year. Urine analysis should be done every 2 months. And USG KUB should be done to evaluate the upper tract and the lower tract once in every 6 months. And physical examination should be done every year. And if there are any signs of risk, immediate special investigation should be done. And regarding the quality of life, it is very important aspect in the management of neurogenic bladder patients in spinal cord injury. The type of the bladder management may influence the health-related quality of life in patients with spinal cord injury. Quality of life actually is influenced by several factors like family support, adjustment and coping ability of the patient, then productivity, then self-esteem, financial stability, education level, physical and social environment, etc. The quality of life can be assessed in spinal cord injury by Qualivine tool. This is special for assessing the quality of life in spinal cord injury patients. It contains 30 items. Short form is available. It's actually copyrighted. With this, we are coming to the end of this lecture series on neurogenic bladder dysfunction. This presentation is submitted to my respected teacher and guide, Professor Dr. George Joseph Sir, who has been the professor and head of the Department of PMR, Government Medical College, Kozhikode. Sir is now working as professor and head of the department, Amrita Institute of Medical Science, Kochi. Thank you.